Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Energy Speaks Back, powered by B2B Energy. My name is Paul Webb, the founder of B2B Energy, and I'm also your host. Each week, I bring to you energy experts from around the world. This is episode 183. Our purpose, as always, is to provide a good understanding of energy management knowledge from around the world, which is available today for us to deliver savings that impact on our planet. Welcome, energy enthusiasts, to another enlightening episode of Energy Speaks Back. Today we focus on sustainability software and the process, how organisations move from scattered data and good intentions to repeatable, trusted workflow that drives action and reporting. I'm particularly excited about this episode because although I've travelled the world podcasting and meeting energy leaders from every corner, today I'm on my home territory in the UK exploring the need to manage data. And today we are joined by an expert who enables data to deliver decisions with actionable insights and operational clarity. So without any further ado, let's delve deep into the data world of James Napier, the founder of Notch. Good afternoon, James. How are you today?
I'm very good, Paul. How are you?
I'm very well. And for once, I haven't met you face to face, but we've had quite a few Teams calls and we've been learning a bit about each other. Whereabouts do you live, actually, James? Whereabouts are you?
I live
taking
in
this call
Cheshire,
from?
just south of Manchester.
Right. Seeing some good weather there at the moment, being sort of Manchester ways, a lot of rain normally.
There's a reason why it's green up here, Paul, is because it's
Right.
virtually wet. So we live on what's called the Cheshire Plain. So all of the weather systems come across Ireland, across Snowdonia, and then they dump their rain in Cheshire. So yes, it's
Right.
always green, which is the upside.
Yeah. I'm actually currently in Thailand and we have 30 degrees during the day, but at night it's dropped down to 22. That temperature drop, it makes it very cold. It's cold in earlier. I had a hoodie on and it just got a little bit too hot. So it's really hard to balance it. But I've only just got here, so I'm struggling to get used to the
Well,
temperature.
I'm sat here in 6 degrees. I have very little sympathy for you, Paul.
Okay. So James, as I say, we've had quite a few conversations, and you've been on our group calls. So I know a little bit about yourself, but for the benefit of our audience today, could you tell us some of your background story and your origin story? What brings you into this industry?
I guess I had for the first 25 plus years, a fairly standard corporate career, kind of working my way up through various different companies. I spent a lot of time in cement aggregates and quarrying, and then my last corporate was Honeywell, where I became GM of their energy business. So looking at energy efficiency, performance contracting, demand response, and smart grid solutions. And for me personally, I kind of fell out of love with big corporates and thought there must be something more interesting to do.
Hmm.
I thought at the same time that the conversation was moving on not just about kilowatt hours, but also to include carbon emissions. And I thought back in 2019, I couldn't see a way that specifically SMEs was where we started, could commit to reduce their emissions if they couldn't measure, track, and report them. So I thought I'd be better off spending my time starting a company that developed a technology that allowed them to do that.
And you mentioned SMEs because I think the SME sector really gets left behind, doesn't it? We put a lot of focus, the likes of ESOS, for instance, and SECRA is all around the big organisations, isn't it? It doesn't really pick up the SMEs and how are they going to deal with this, as you say. And do you feel that industry is struggling regarding that data?
So I think that, yeah, I think all businesses are struggling with the data because it's new data that in many cases
Mm.
businesses haven't had to collect before and don't know how to collect it. And I think in many cases the data part of carbon accounting is the single biggest challenge, which
Yeah.
will be resolved inevitably over time. I think SMEs, I mean, it's a balance, isn't it? Government thinks it's okay to put onus on bigger businesses because they can afford it, but they get really concerned about overburdening SMEs with legislation and red tape. So there tends to be a little bit that the government leaves SMEs to fend for themselves. So that it's kind of that yin and yang between,
Mm.
do we put some obligation on them so we provide them structure, or do we leave them alone and let them get on with it? And I think the biggest driver of action for SMEs is supply chain. It's B2B
Yeah,
businesses. And I think without the structure, without legislation saying, here is an expectation of what you should report as a minimum, like SECR, it kind of leaves SMEs to fend for themselves. And I'm not entirely sure that helps them. That there are a number of government initiatives that provide free services to SMEs, but inevitably you ultimately get what free will pay for.
yeah,
And so you get something to start with, and then the grant money runs out, and there's no continuation of it, and there's no updating it in a market that's constantly evolving. So I think, yeah, I think more structure would help SMEs, even if there's a cost to it, because there's ultimately a financial benefit of being compliant with sustainability standards.
yeah. And when we talk about the data, we're breaking it out into these different areas, aren't we? Scopes one, scopes two, and scopes three. Um, and it's the scope three that causes the major problem, isn't it?
It is certainly in terms of data. If you think of the scopes, scope one is essentially fuels that you use in your business. So gas, fuels in fleet, and any refrigerants that you might lose as part of your operations. Scope two is the electricity that you buy in. It also covers things like purchased heating and cooling, steam, but that's very specialist. And then scope three looks at upstream, the carbon embodied in everything that you buy. Downstream, the carbon emitted as a consequence of everything that you sell. So that's when it starts to get really complicated because you have to, especially downstream, is what are the what are the emissions that I'm responsible for because of what I sell, especially if I'm a service, what does that look like? So we kind of talk about a journey. So scope one, scope two should be okay. All of that data exists within a business. A lot of the focus on carbon reduction is what I would call energy net zero. So it's energy efficiency,
Mhm.
consuming less, on-site generation, those types of assets, which is all really good stuff. The broader net zero is, how do I build it into my innovation? How do I build circularity into my products? How do I get data from my supply chain? And how do I work differently with my suppliers with carbon emissions as an additional constraint of that, relationship in total?
And you've built a software system process around all of this, haven't you? What's been the principles regarding that software from A to B?
So when we designed the software, we had kind of three guiding principles. The first one is we call it it's got to be wow, and that we determine that as people have got to like the look and feel of it, but also easily understand what it's telling them.
Yeah.
Secondly, it's got to have value, and that's not just the cost, but people can actually do something with the information that they see. And the third one is it's got to be as easy and simple as possible to use. So I think what I've learned over the last coming up 6 years is it's really easy to make something complicated. It's really hard to make something simple.
Yeah. And especially when the subject's so complicated, how do you get to that position when you've got a complicated subject and you're trying to make something as easy as you can to implement the complexities?
So I think it's all about, as I learned the software term UX, so the user experience is
Yep.
essentially when I started designing the system, I started off by thinking what would be useful for me as a business leader and how would I like to see it. And again, it's very much this balance between giving people enough for what they need now and the next few steps without giving them everything that they need, expecting them to pay for it, and then eventually scaring them that they this is going to be too much, too complicated, too hard. So what I'll do is, excuse me, is I'll just wait.
Mm.
So there's a real balance of breaking it down. That's why we start with scope one and scope two, and then make it easy for them to expand. And we've built a network of partners who can actually help with the inputs, which is the network that you have, and then also help with the outputs. So
Yeah.
once people have measured and got a plan, the next thing they want to know is who can help me. And in many cases, people are starting with the energy net zero part of it.
Hmm.
So back in my days at Honeywell, there were a lot of energy efficiency projects that never got funded, even though the financials on them made a huge amount of sense. And it was largely because companies would rather invest in growth than cost saving. So
Yeah.
they predetermined the amount of capital that was available. And what we're finding now is with carbon being another consideration, it's another lever to say, actually, one, we can justify doing this efficiency project. But secondly, because we're reducing carbon, it helps with our customer messaging. It's very difficult to actively promote cost saving to customers because all they want is you to reduce your price. But if you say we've reduced our carbon at this site down by 25% over the last year, that's a really positive message in today's environment to encourage your customers to continue buying from you.
Yeah. And does your software take you through the whole journey of net zero?
Yes, so it's designed to, you can start wherever you want to, as little as or as much as you want, excuse me, and then you can go on what we call a personal journey. So we've got micro businesses who just report electricity and some business travel.
Right.
And last year we completed 3 billion of annual spend for one of the UK water companies in scope three.
Hmm.
So again, kind of anywhere in between. And we've got companies from and organisations from charities, manufacturing, a lot of whiskey distillers, right the way through to Premiership football clubs, advanced manufacturing and law firms. So really, it doesn't matter what type of sector you're from, what size of business, or how complex your emissions are, you can build them all on the platform.
Yeah. And the people that are taking this the full journey, are they really behind it, or is it something that they feel as though they've been dragged along the journey?
So I would say simplistically, all, if not the vast majority of businesses that we are supporting are doing it because someone's telling them that they have to.
Yeah.
And the larger businesses, it's SECR, ESOS 4 obviously
Yeah.
is having more, depending on where it actually lands, more onus on carbon as well within it.
Mm.
Um, what we try and do is to work with people to find the commercial value in doing it. And so the reason for acting is because they have to. The reason for continuing might be because they have to continue to report, but we also try and find real, as I say, value. And that tends to
Yeah.
come in three areas, which is winning and retaining work, reducing costs. So the opportunity to really look at what you do in your business, reduce emissions, but also reduce cost. And then I think not to be underestimated, the ability to engage employees. So, a lot of, I think there was a recent survey, 80% of employees are disengaged at work. So
Right.
giving them something that is a feel-good factor. We're seeing a lot of businesses re-engaging, driving employee involvement in reducing carbon emissions, and that has a positive output for the business as well.
Yeah. And presumably the software comes with a service, so the organization can employ you to deliver this, or do they just, or some clients, they just take it off the shelf and deal with whatever they need to. Do you tailor that as well?
Yeah, I think people can take the software. We have less than a handful of companies that say, just give me the software and I'll do it on my own. We've built a network of partners.
Yeah.
We work with them again, simplicity in two ways. So resellers who take the software and they provide all of the
Yeah, yeah,
consultancy, and referral partners where they essentially have clients that they want to be able to offer the service to because it's complementary to what they do, but they don't want to do it themselves. So the ability to say, I'd rather say yes with confidence to a client than say no and they go and talk to somebody else who might do what I do as my core business as well.
yeah, yeah. And what do you see the challenges with all of this, with these organisations?
I think the challenge is um, leaders don't really understand where this fits in their organization. So we have the most common conversation I have is was what I would call uncomfortable leaders, which is there's this thing called net zero, and most people take a view on its validity, from very valid to a complete no nonsense.
Mm,
But it's either impacting or is going to impact my business, and I can't position it within my organization. So I don't know how much to spend on it. I don't know what good looks like. I don't, it's this classic, we call it Goldilocks, is I don't want to be seen to be behind my competitors, but I absolutely have no confidence in wanting to be ahead of them as a starting point. So it's finding that entry point and finding it acceptable. And then, as I said, over time is finding the value. So allowing companies, and we've got lots of companies who say, I'm not interested in anything else other than ticking a compliance box.
mm.
And we've got a business that's double the size of its business by winning new contracts because it scores better than its competitors on sustainability.
Yeah, because it can demonstrate what it's doing regarding
Exactly. And
the
again, with
scopes.
all these things, they're incredibly personal things, is that in some businesses, there's no return for being ahead of anything other than the basics. In others, as I said, you can make significant strides forwards with your business by differentiating. And very simplistically, all your competitors can do what you can do as a basic set of functions. So how are you going to start to differentiate with your potential customers when you take control systems? Any SI can put in control systems, but what are you going to be the SI that they choose? And in many cases now, sustainability is another differentiator that companies can have to drive sales.
Yeah. Do you think getting to net zero is a straightforward process with organizations? It's a bit of a loaded question because I want to ask another question after it, but I do apologize. I don't normally do the loaded questions, but this subject really does lead you into loaded questions, doesn't it? So the process to getting into net zero, straightforward or not? I
So I
suppose
think
it
if you
depends, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think if you look how politicized the term net zero is at the moment, in the UK has lost consensus on net zero. And I think your view on net zero really positions you on the political spectrum.
Hmm.
That seems to be it. I think one of the things about net zero is whether it's technically feasible to get there at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, yeah,
I think the concept of an organization having no environmental impact, I think, is difficult, especially as you get to some of the more heavy industry. I think if you look at credits, and the credits is a little bit Wild West at the moment, but I think we've moved on from cheap offset credits to much more structured sequestration and nature enhancing credits, which I think will be important. Is I don't think it's straightforward. I think any business that says we're net zero now, I would question
yeah.
personally.
I
I
would as
just don't
well.
think the technology exists for us to be there. But I think, in my opinion, the planet's changing. We need to do something different. I think we will. There's a lot to despair about human beings. One of the things we're really positive about is given the right framing, we're amazing problem solvers. And I think we will find a way to work with a better relationship with the planet. If we define that as net zero, then so be it. But I just think we need if we were a business we're going we're going bust at some point in the future. So we need to have that relationship with the planet, whatever you call it, that allows us to thrive for the long term.
Yeah. My loaded question, you started to answer it regarding the feasibility going forwards. Do you think we have feasibility of, no, I'm not going to say everyone being net zero, but organizations being able to achieve net zero?
I personally don't think we have the technology yet that allows us to do it. I always remember there's a great series on Netflix called What's Next with Bill Gates, and
Right.
one of them is about can we solve climate change, and I will misquote this, but they'd got some innovators presenting to kind of an investment panel that Bill Gates was part of as part of his foundation, and this guy said something like, all we need to do to scale this globally is to build 125 manufacturing sites, each of which are 9 times larger than the biggest manufacturing site that exists today. And one of the guys on the panel went, so that's quite a challenge then. And you kind of think that some of these things, the scale of moving the human race off fossil fuels is huge.
Mm.
And that's before you take into account any vested interests in oil and maintaining that cash flow, the physical technology to move the world off coal, gas, and oil is massive because it's the foundation that we sit on.
Yeah. And I don't think there's not one solution fits all, is there? There's so
No.
many different issues. When I look at some of my clients, when I try to sort of low hanging fruit type elements to help them get to net zero, it's totally different. Totally different.
And that's why we talk about personal journeys is for some businesses it's easier than others.
Mm.
For other businesses, it takes it takes a mindset change. I mean, ultimately, to be net zero, we always equate it a bit like health and safety is coming from the quarrying industry for a while. I mean, that was everything we did started with health and safety because it's a dangerous business
Yeah.
or can be dangerous. The same thing goes with businesses is if I'm going to innovate, is I need to understand what the impact on my carbon emissions are. If I'm going to make a commitment to fleet or to a supplier, if I'm going to make an acquisition, what's that going to do to my carbon footprint? Is until such time as it becomes a core part of the way the business operates with targets, the classic, we delegated it to Dave in health and safety, and he does a report for us. That's where a lot of companies are now, but that doesn't get you to net zero. It's
No.
the same as in our organization, Dave is responsible for health and safety,
Yeah.
when the answer, of course, is everyone's responsible for health and safety.
Do you think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the word of offsetting towards the end, maybe?
I think credits has to be part of getting to net zero.
Mm.
Everyone's talking about a 90% mitigation and 10% offsetting is kind of the target. That is predicated on the availability of scalable technologies to be able to do that. I think credits, as I said before, is a maturing part of the ecosystem of sustainability. I personally think nature-based credits should be something that most companies are looking at first. I think there are two. If you look at the COP that just happened in Belém in Brazil, there's another COP, which is the nature COP. So I think it's possible for us to get to carbon net zero with no positive or even a negative impact on nature. And I think it's incumbent when we're looking at sustainability that we look at how we impact or improve and sustain nature. So I think if a company's going to use credits, then I think they should consider, can I use credits that enhance nature as because I think it helps with the brand. I mean, most companies saying, here's some nice flowers, some forests, some pollinators is much better than I think we've invested in direct air capture technology because I think it's not bad, but it's less brand aligned than being able to say, here's my company's forest that we've helped build.
Yeah. And is there going to be enough credits available for this onrush? And
Yeah,
when I'm say certified credits, isn't it? As well, it has to be certified. Can't just be a credit as such.
yeah. All the predictions are that there won't be.
Yeah.
And I think that's where companies really have to understand credits because at some point in time, they will have to participate in that market. And um, my personal view is, as I said, in an ideal world, companies should get credits that are as close as possible to their point of operations, time-wise, close to the time they use them, because you can have credits up to 4 or 5 years old that are still valid. And I would suggest nature-based credits would be the first ones to look at.
Mm.
There's a portfolio you can have. But I think again, we've just signed a partnership with a company called Nature Broking to look at promoting credits at the same time as people are really starting to understand how much should I invest in carbon reporting and sustainability. Trying to say you should be thinking about credits as well, it is quite a difficult
Yeah.
conversation. So we're going to go through a whole process of educating, giving people balanced information about credits and then helping them through the software to be able to see this is what credits I might need in the future, and these are the types of credits I could buy. So I
Yeah.
think it's kind of warming people up, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. And helping them along the journey, basically.
Well, exactly. And there's lots of things that said, if a credit is £50 a ton today, it'll be £250 a ton in 2030. So there's that doesn't necessarily inspire people to pay £50 a ton today to secure their credits for 2030 because as a business leader, I just don't know if I need any. So
Yeah.
it's like a wasted expense today. So I think it's for business leaders, it's giving people clarity and confidence. I think that's the most important thing. Without that, the best thing I can do is wait.
Yeah. Let's go back to the client base you have. Is there organizations that have, obviously we're not searching for names here, but is there organizations that are close to net zero or they've achieved net, is there such a thing of people being there for net zero ready for the deadline?
So I haven't seen net zero yet. I think the big tech companies, so mainly Microsoft, Google, Amazon, have all committed to be net zero, I think 2030 or close to 2030, but they are
Yeah.
by far and away the largest purchasers of credits. So they're going to do a lot of that through credits. I think I was at a talk with Microsoft and they reckon they're the biggest real estate developers on the planet at the moment. And
Hmm.
it's data centers
Yeah.
for AI in the main. Um, so I think most businesses are really just getting stuck into scope three, especially the large to smaller ones, that the corporate kind of conglomerates may be a bit further down the line, but I'm yet to see a business that really has I guess a good view of their scope three emissions, and that's largely because the data to support them doing that really doesn't exist at the moment. You can do what's called spend-based conversion.
Yeah, I was going to say
That's
that
been,
there's like a
yeah.
shortcut, isn't there, for now?
Yeah, and that's been proven to be between 10 and 200% wrong. So again, in terms of and the
That is
measure.
a lot out then.
Yeah, well, I think for me, anything that's more than 100% wrong is just called wrong. It kind of almost doesn't matter how wrong it is
Exactly.
after that.
Yeah.
So I think if you look at the Science-Based Target Initiative, their new corporate standard is looking at rather than calculate scope three emissions for what you buy, they're suggesting set targets for the amount or the proportion of what you spend with companies who are committed to net zero,
Yeah.
because that seems a much better driver of action. But also, I think it reflects that, last year or earlier this year, nearly last year, is SBTI kicked out a lot of the scope 3 targets from big companies because they committed to these targets 3 to 5 years ago, and then I think realized there's a lot more complexity in achieving these reductions, and the availability of data is the key driver.
Yeah.
So they've stopped committing to achieve them. So their scope 3 targets were kicked out, and I think that's helped to inform the new standard. But yeah, I mean, I would say any company that tells you they're net zero today has either taken a massive shortcut or isn't telling exactly an honest story. And as
Yeah.
I said before, in many cases, the technology just doesn't exist to allow that to happen.
I was in a on an exhibition 2 years ago, and this company stood up and said that they were net zero then. And I don't think they were nowhere near net zero, because even 2 years ago, no one really knew what that meant
Mm.
exactly, you know. So to have that on there, they had it all over their slides. They were boasting, in a key place, um, and yeah, it's just not possible. And as you say, you haven't got anyone that you've seen that with already to
No, we,
date
we we had a lot
or
of
close.
organizations. Yeah, we had a lot of organizations claiming carbon neutrality a few years ago, and thankfully we've moved on from that. But um, we got into a situation whereby people would buy really cheap credits that were old credits, report a proportion of their emissions, buy the credits to offset those, and then claim the entire company was carbon neutral when they weren't. Um, they weren't measuring all of their emissions. Certainly, most weren't measuring scope 3. And
Hmm.
of course, the credit sellers weren't incentivized to caveat that. So they would say, we have offset your gas and electricity emissions. They would say, here's, you tell us you need 2,000 tons of credits. Here's 2,000 tons of credits. You're carbon neutral. So you ended up with people greenwashing a lot.
Yeah,
And I think for me, I would question if you're a UK business with emissions buying 4-year-old waste to energy credits from India for $4 a ton. I would question whether you're solving the problem you're creating.
yeah,
But that's what people were doing. So I think the credits will become more expensive, but they'll become more expensive because they're more appropriate to solve the problem. And I think there's a lot of forest preservation credits, so that there's no additional carbon being sequestered. They're just maintaining forests to stop them burning down, which isn't a bad thing. But I really think that companies who are buying credits really need to understand what they're buying, why they're buying it, and why it's right for their business.
yeah. Forgive me if I get this wrong, but is scopes free? Is scope free someone else's scopes 1 and 2? Is that how it sort of works, or is it a bit
Yes.
more? It is.
Yeah. So it's very similar to financial accounting, that my costs are someone else's sale.
Yeah,
So I'm buying a product as a cost that someone is selling me as revenue. In this case, if I'm buying a component, then I'm paying for the component, but I'm also acquiring the carbon in that component. And that's the right thing to do,
yeah,
because if I don't have to report that carbon, I'm not incentivized to look for lowest carbon products and services to buy. So, people talk about double counting, but we double count financially anyway,
yeah, yeah,
because the £50 that I've sold to you, I put on my P&L, you put on your P&L, you put it into another product and sell it to somebody else, and they put it on their P&L. So that counting moves through in exactly the same way carbon emissions follow the construction and sale and use of a product.
yeah. And interesting, we are, you're talking, you've just aligned that with the financial side. We are now reporting significantly on carbon in our company accounts, aren't we? It has been the subject has been risen quite a high level with all the board directors now, hasn't it?
I think I think if you think about the concept of the environment as a stakeholder in a business, that is something that will be an obligation at some point for every business.
Mm,
There are certain factors that are delaying that. The current um, government in the US, there's a lot of tension here about the pace with which to do it. And as I think, as we said before, we've lost consensus about whether it's the right thing to do. But ultimately, again, in the same way that you can't have a company today that says you don't care about the safety of your employees, in the future, you can't have a company that says we don't care about our impact on the environment.
yeah,
And you're going to have to prove that you do care and prove what your impact is.
yeah. Are
And I
we
think if
seeing?
you look at, sorry, if you look at
No, go
health
on.
and safety, you have a health and safety breach, it precludes you from bidding for certain contracts for a period of time. The same thing will happen environment.
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, are we seeing organisations voluntary uh, sort of providing this data and this information as a voluntary? We talked about SME and the difference on the SECRA because if you wanted, you can do SECRA as a voluntary process, can't you? Are we seeing organisations doing it voluntary?
So I think majority wise, no. And I said, and I think people do it when they're told to. And I think one of the challenges for smaller businesses is that they'll have multiple larger customers,
Yeah,
and the multiple larger customers are likely to ask them for multiple different types of reporting. So there's different schemes. There's EcoVadis. There's a new one that's called uh, Safe Planet. There's quite, half a dozen. So you actually end up with these SMEs saying, actually, I've got 6 or 7 different things that all want slightly different types of information, which is why I think if the government said everyone produces an SECR report, for instance, to a minimum standard, then all of the larger organizations should be encouraged to accept that as compliance.
yeah, yeah.
So, but I'm not seeing a huge number of organizations rushing to proactively start providing that information. And I don't think it's because companies don't care. I think it's because, well, the world's pretty bonkers at the moment, Paul. I'm sure you'll agree. So,
Only a
Maslow's
little bit.
hierarchy is
Yeah,
is I've got more fundamental things that I think I need to work through today, and that can wait till tomorrow. But we are seeing more and more companies saying, if you don't do this, you can't work with us. So I think that's helping
that's
drive.
going to be a driver. Yeah,
It
yeah.
is.
Um, it's come to that time, James, that I'd like to invite you to answer my favourite question, which is there anything you can give back to our industry or the listeners today as some form of takeaway for them?
So I think for people that are in the industry who have clients who want carbon accounting, I think what we can give them is the ability to say yes with confidence. So I think as we've talked about energy net zero, carbon accounting is kind of the natural evolution of that. So we see a lot of our partners who are providing energy services to customers, and then they say, can you help me with scope 3? And so we can give them the ability to say, yes, of course we can, and we can continue to work with them. I think for end users, it's the ability to make sustainability make sense for your business.
Yeah,
So that might be to not overinvest in it or to understand how it actually adds some value,
yeah,
growth, cost savings. And I genuinely, slightly biased, but do generally believe that sustainability is a business improvement lever. So again, the network can help drive value for their clients. The clients can help achieve value by using sustainability as a way to drive that additional value.
yeah. There is an end game, isn't there? So reduced consumption of your carbon, say, not just your energy, is going to reduce your cost. Straight,
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
there's a straight
Exactly.
ratio for that. And then by reducing your consumption and your cost, we're going to reduce your carbon long term.
And we're seeing costs as well in, if you think about, the world's gone to just-in-time supply chains because that was financially efficient, but it gives more logistics trips. So we're seeing lots of clients going back to their customers and going, if we work with you slightly differently, we could take carbon out of this relationship. And that often, we've seen a number of cases where that reduces the logistics miles, and the client isn't buying logistic miles, so they don't ask for a cost reduction. They just want the carbon savings. The supplier can report the carbon savings and pocket the logistics savings.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's lots of examples about, we I've talked about this structural cost. This is how we operate. Sustainability gives a new opportunity to re-look at that and a different parameter within which to say, we could change this and it would reduce these carbon emissions down. At the moment, I just want the minimum financial position, but you get the balance between carbon and cost, and that may be some things that companies are willing to look at.
and your system reports in all of those different aspects. You can
Yes,
cut the cake anyway,
yes,
show pound note savings or carbon savings, etc., etc.
yes. And I
Yeah,
think it's, you know, I guess an example, we mapped 100 million ton kilometers for a business that has a lot of logistics, and they've been doing that logistics for years and years, and it evolves very organically. And they found they were doing a lot of double handling that they really hadn't appreciated because it was
hmm,
just, this is how we work. And so not only are they looking at how can we take carbon out of that logistics network, but how could we reduce the cost down as well? So I think they'll end up having a joint kind of lower carbon, lower cost network. But if it wasn't for having to map their emissions, they the I guess the task to map their logistics would never have risen to the top. There
yeah,
was always other stuff, and the logistics wasn't broken, so it didn't need fixing. And that's where I think sustainability really helps give that, I guess, opportunity to look at how we do business and the ability to talk to your customers about how to change that, which can reduce costs as well.
yeah. Can we just focus and put the lens on the future? How is the future looking? Like, for instance, you as an organization, what have you got planned for the future regarding your software? Is there more changes to come, do you feel?
Yeah, I mean it's constantly evolving. So
Yeah.
one of the things that we've got to do is to help people get better data. And then, so things like product carbon footprinting is going to be coming in a major way. So when I sell you 10 of these widgets, I tell you the cost, but I also tell you the carbon. And I have an audit report that tells me how I got to that carbon. So that is something that has to be done within the software that we're building at the moment. I think naturally there's AI and AI to help people use it. I don't see how AI can make the numbers up. You can't have AI that makes up the financial numbers, so I
No.
don't see how you can have it make up the carbon numbers. But I think, yeah, it's constantly evolving. So I think we get to a point whereby every company produces a bill of materials, a cost for their product, and a carbon. And it will be expected in the future that whatever I buy comes with a cost, excuse me, and a carbon number.
Yeah.
So if you think of everything that has to happen to get to that point, that's what we have to support through the platform.
Do you think we will see, for instance, if I brought a can of Coke, I was going to say Coke Zero then, it was just a bit of a pun really. Do you think it will say the price of this can of Coke is, say, £1.50, and the price of this car is in carbon? Do you think we're ever going to see that?
Yes. And I think we'll see it B2B first.
Yeah.
I think consumers, we tend to be in general less discerning. So if I like Coke, I'm going to buy it because I deserve it and I like
Yeah.
it, and it doesn't really matter. The carbon footprint would be
Mm.
the standard thing. Some people might say, well, Pepsi's lower carbon, so I'll drink Pepsi, but I don't like it as much. But that isn't that. But certainly B2B, I think there will be an expectation that says, if you can't give me a high quality carbon number for your product, I'm going to at the very least mark you down significantly on your tender.
Yeah.
But more importantly, in the future, I may, if I've got other options where I have got those numbers, I'll choose not to buy from you.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. Exactly what you're saying there. Because I think we're struggling to see the sugar side of it, aren't we? Where people are still buying this stuff because it doesn't matter whether it's been increased because of the sugar levels, um, sugar tax or whatever we call it. That doesn't seem, I don't think, making much of an impact on the B2C side of it. But um, and I'm sure you're right there that we're not going to see that much of a difference with carbon if we start seeing that on there as well.
I think there's a big difference between business and consumers,
Yeah,
and I think it's much easier to get businesses to take the responsibility. So I think consumers in some case are discerning. I think the vast majority probably just think I deserve it. It's a bit like I always say, if I told my wife our future holidays were going on the train camping in North Wales, she'd be another incentive to start the search for her next husband.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think we all justify those things to ourselves. So I think, going back to my greater problem solving is I think business will decarbonize the world. I do think the climate is changing. I think you look at the number of people being displaced, the number of weather events. I think the biggest challenge we have is that we tend not to change until we have to. And I think, the planet has momentum. So when it gets to the point that we have to change, it's probably a bit too late because you don't change today and solve the problem tomorrow.
yeah,
So I do think, there are predictions we'll get to 2.7 degrees by the end of the century. And the science says there will be a catastrophic failure of the ecosystem at 2.4 degrees. So, not being negative, but for you and I, Paul, probably not our problem to worry about in the main, but certainly for future generations,
yeah,
yeah, I think, that they will look back and say, these guys knew. Why
yeah,
didn't they do more? And of
yeah,
course, the answer is because en masse, we tend not to take responsibility for the problem. But that's where I think business and that pressure means that ultimately we will solve the problem. I personally don't think we'll solve it in time,
no,
but I think we will get to a point whereby we have a different relationship with the planet. And I don't necessarily think that means us having to live completely differently. It just means we have to invent new technology, and that's where the opportunity comes from because innovation is a great way to drive economic growth.
yeah. I always say that we can't stop it, but we can slow it down. And I think
Yes,
that's going to be the thing, slowing it down with the new technologies and being forced to go down other routes, possibly, you know. But I feel it's my problem now, so I'm trying to address it. Hence this podcast. But I understand what you're saying, James. It's been really interesting, and while I'm sort of talking to you today, I'm thinking this is just podcast number one. I'm sure there's going to be opportunities to do other podcasts and talk about the ongoing story here. So please feel free at any time to contact me, and we can do another one of these to
oh,
to
brilliant.
introduce the next level of what's happening really. So this is day one, and I'd like to thank you very much today, James, for day one. It's been very interesting to learn about the challenges and what's out there.
No, thanks very much for the opportunity. Much
Brilliant.
appreciated.
So James, thank you very much, and you and your family stay safe in these times.
Yeah, we'll do any.
Thank you to my guest for joining me today on Energy Speaks Back. I'm very proud and humbled to have the opportunity to interview energy experts from around the world. And I hope you found today's episode of value. Please don't forget to listen to the previous episodes. They are full of insights to help you make real impact on energy efficiency. And remember, those tiny changes that we make today can bring us profound savings in the future. Together we can drive change and make a difference. That leaves me with one more thing to say. You and your family, be safe in these times.